Let's see who we have here. A lot of people around Europe, so I check it out, the list of attendees here. People from Germany, Switzerland, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands as well. Norway. Yeah, Norway. India as well. France, Malta, and one from Silicon Valley as well. That's great. There's quite late evening there already, so that's fine. So, hey, thanks a lot for all of you that you joined that webinar. I'm sure that we will have a great 1 hour session. And our topic is, as you know, outsourced versus in-house innovation scouting. And we will have a great guest here as well. So you will know more about it really soon. And when Michael join our call as well. And few notes that basically you don't need to write down all of these things. So we send you a summary of these topics that we are discussing, and also you get the recording of the webinar. But definitely it's good to write down thoughts and ideas and also questions, because we have a Q&A session at the end of the session. So please focus on discussions, write down the notes if you have any good ideas or questions. That's maybe the some kind of structure part of the webinar, and then I introduced myself shortly. So Paavo Beckman, and my background is that I have led teams in companies in the United States, in the UK, and Finland, and also in Spain at some point. And earlier I have created engagement tools and services for big corporations out there in the United States and in the UK, and for example for Sony and Universal. And nowadays I'm a founder and chief of development at Catapult. So that's shortly my background, and then shortly also the background, or what Catapult is, what we are doing. So basically, Catapult is data-driven research company. We are analyzing continuously more than 2 million companies in tech and innovation field, and we have a data analyst and research team. But then additionally, we have also InnoPipe platform, discovery platform. And we develop it for our internal use for our research team 4 years, and then our clients started to ask, hey, could we utilize that as well? And then we decided to dedicate our own team for that development. Nowadays, it's a SaaS platform for discovering innovative companies out there internationally. And we have collaborated with more than 300 corporations out there around Europe. So we have quite a lot of experience regarding the learnings and understanding of those challenges as well. But that's shortly that what we are doing. And then last thing before we jump to the topic itself, there are some of our trusted partners. So that tells only that there are different type of clients out there. They are everything from agriculture to space industry. So basically, manufacturers, construction companies, banks, logistic companies, and also governmental players like Finnish tax office and social security office, and also cities and universities. So variation of our clients is quite wide. But that's shortly the background and who we are, who I am, and but I think now it's good to focus on the most important things, and Michael, who is our guest in this webinar. So let's check it out. Okay, great to see you here, Michael. So how is everything there? Sorry, I can't hear you at the moment. Let's check it out. If you check it out, any kind of settings.
Yes, give me a
Oh,
second.
now it works. Now it works.
Okay, it's right. I couldn't adjust anything up front because we're coming here. Yes,
Yeah.
we also need to check is
Yeah.
the camera actually right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Everything works now perfectly.
Yeah. Perfect.
So
Good.
how is everything there in German?
All good so far. Good weather. Can't complain.
Yeah.
Besides the overall challenges we have in the world, but
Yeah.
let's not talk about this right now.
Yeah, we are living in a weird world at the moment, unfortunately. But hey, thanks for joining with me and having all this discussion regarding innovation scouting. But first of all, it would be nice to know that who Michael is. So tell us with your own words that who you are, what do you do, and
Sure.
also what type of experience you have in this innovation scouting field.
Sure. So my name is Michael or Michael in Germany, Michael Vormittag, and I'm currently leading the CTO office in Daimler Truck. That's a newly founded company. So we spun out of the Daimler AG or Mercedes-Benz AG in end of last year. And I'm responsible for the CTO office as well as digital enablement. So that's basically looking into all foundational IT topics, right? So really from API management, FOSS, those things, right? It's really foundational, the foundational layer of IT technology. That's what I'm currently doing. Before that, I was about 5 years responsible, I think about 5 years responsible for innovation and partnerships in Mercedes-Benz marketing and sales. And that's also where a lot of this experience we'll talk about today comes from, but not only. I've been always in the digital innovation space, from really doing things myself with a team as a product owner or as a coach, and up to really also scouting startups, working with startups in the investment space. I've been a bit on both sides. I worked on now in a corporate on this. I also started a startup once back in my uni days. And I also worked for a commercialization vehicle, basically where we try to spin out companies and bring it to corporate. So I kind of know both sides, but have more, of course, extensive experience on the corporate side because that's kind of had most of the stuff. Also back from my studies, I was doing this intersection between technology, entrepreneurship, and IT. So I was always in this space. So particular for innovation scouting. Well, one thing is I probably started the first structured approaches of working with startups in Daimler. I was part of those initiatives. I built an own startup program together with partners within my last role. I worked with events, conferences on scouting. So, for example, also in Finland with Slush on how we can structuredly work on startup scouting. I worked with EU initiatives, cities, and VCs on scouting. And I did also scouting myself, really on the desktop. So I've seen kind of a lot of things in this. Yeah, maybe that is a very short spin on kind of what's my experience in this and who am I.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. And so you have quite a lot of experience and especially from different type of angles as well, so that you can talk about these these things easily. So first thing that before we jump to the topic, I have hard questions for you. But before that, we could have a poll for audience as well. So if we put that, wait a second, put that poll there so that people can see it. And so basically, if you, all audience, if you take your mobile phone, write down slido.com, you can utilize the QR code as well, and then put that code, that 418678. and then you can click that how do you scout for innovation. So they are 4 options: the outsourced, in-house, both outsourcing and doing it in in-house, and also option that we don't do innovation scouting. So mostly at least at this point in-house. Okay, now there's both also. Yeah, and sounds good. So there are different type of structures. So in-house and also both outsource and in-house. Those are same size. So interesting, and but there are not people who don't do at this point. Please continue answering, and if you don't do innovation scouting, that's definitely okay as well. So, yeah, but I think that so mostly it seems that people do 45% do both of those, so utilize some kind of combination and yeah, that's a good point. I write down some of these notes that both and in-house. Yes, and sounds good. We can continue, and yes. So, but hey, first of all, it would be good to hear your thoughts that if you think about bigger picture of innovation scouting, that what's important for innovation scouting, if you think about those few elements of it.
Well, I think the question is, of course, how do you do this? So let's take it from this. I think there's probably more angles to what's important for innovation scouting, but I think let's just answer it from the perspective of how do you do it. And I think in order to make this successful, you just can't sit down on your desktop, type it in Google, I need a company for AI, and you'll find any results, right? So I think you have to, it is not that easy. It's a more complex thing. So I think this is very, very important to understand. There are companies out there, there are companies in different maturities out there. Some companies have a website, some don't. Sometimes they write stuff on the website which is true. Mostly it's not. Maybe to some extent, you know what I mean, right? It's of course it's a sales thing, but the question is really, how do you understand what is really out there? How do you get the gist of what's good, what's bad, what makes sense for me? And so it's not an easy task. So that's, I think, maybe the first statement we can put here. And you can't just Google it. I mean, you will find something. What's the biggest company in a specific space? Probably you find this in Google, right? But as long as that doesn't mean that's the right one, right? So how do you do this properly? So for me, it kind of there's 3 pillars to what is actually important in doing innovation scouting. So first of all, I think you need to understand that it can't be done only by sitting on your desktop and typing things into your machine. So you need to have connection to the ecosystems you're interested in. Right? This can be direct, this can be indirect, and I'll go through this in a second deeper, but I think this is like one of the most important things. It's not just a desktop job, so it's a connection job, an ecosystem job. Second pillar, I think, which is important, is you have to be structured and you should be data driven, because yes, it's a connection job, it's an ecosystem job, but it's also a very much, there's so many companies, there's so many countries, there's so many technologies, there's so many nuances. So if you don't have any approach which gives you structure and utilizes data and what you do, then it's still to some extent random. And then lastly, execution piece, right? So if you want to find some innovation, I think the question here is also a good point. I'll add to this in a second. Lastly, the execution piece of it, right? You can find anything. If you can't execute on it, then what is it worth? And how do you know even if it's good, right? I think the execution piece, even though it's not the scouting itself, is critical, because only then you can actually know if whatever you find makes sense. So there was a question in the chat on what is innovation scouting. That is a fair point. So I would understand innovation scouting here as the method the method of identifying technologies, new technologies, and of course, what is innovation is a big thing. But let's say new technologies which are aiming to change the way you operate a certain business, product, technology, which are not the standard, which are beyond what you have. So this can be really small if you don't have much, but it can also be really big if you have a lot, right? So I think you have to be flexible. But it's always the means of identifying those technologies, those companies, and I would say both technologies and companies, but very much tied for me to companies, because in many cases you can only execute if you have someone who can help you with. So it's not about, okay, AI is my goal, but it's rather a company which delivers a specific AI theme, solution, topic, which you can work with in the end as a company. So that's how I would see this. So those are those, and maybe Paavo, do you have another definition for that?
Yeah, but I think those are really good ones, because those, first you need to understand that field so that you even know what you should find. So that's some kind of combination. Of course, internally in your company you have a needs and so on, so you know that what type of problems you are solving, and maybe you have a good goals that you want to achieve. But same time, I think it's really important what you said, that the understanding the field so that you can more precisely know that what you should do also, and what type of opportunities are there. And then you mentioned also this the data approach, and that's really interesting, that whatever is the system how you utilize data. But I think that if you don't want to only hassling there, you need to have some kind of data driven approach, because as you mentioned, that there are so many opportunities and technologies out there, and those new technologies come to the market all the time. So there needs to be some kind of systematic way to do it. And then also this execution part, that even though it's not concretely part of maybe the innovation scouting, but if you don't have any kind of understanding that how you take steps with those good advanced innovative companies there, when you find it, then it's worthless to do that work if you don't have at least some kind of capabilities, one person who's responsible is to take those and help that collaboration, for example. So I think that those are really good points.
Then let's maybe dive a bit more into the points, because I think that might be also very interesting for the audience if we put more flesh to the bone, basically. For example, let's go there pillar by pillar. I think this is going to be interesting for the audience, right? So, for example, ecosystem connection, right? So I said, right, so can't just do desktop research. What I find is usually, I mean, of course, there's also different angles. So do you want to scout the world? Do you want to have the best company in the whole world for working with you? And also the question is, what is the best? But let's only focus on technology, right? So best technology in the world. Then, of course, having like this real hands-on ecosystem connection is maybe not even that easy, because you suddenly have a whole world to talk to. So that might be not feasible. But if you, for example, a company who is located in, I don't know, in the Nordics.
Sorry, now we lost Michael. Hopefully you hear me normally. Let's see. Wait a second. So let's Michael will join soon back. I'm sure that but Michael said it would be good to go a bit deeper regarding those three pillars. So wait a second, I got the So Harry, you sent the question there. So are we talking about idea or also in research world, universities and research institution and so on? But generally speaking, when we are talking about innovation scouting, usually those are somehow commercial related cases already. Not in every time, but most of cases, because usually companies want to have something that they could start to utilize quite quickly, so that they don't need to start from the scratch. So that basically that way, quite often they want to find not ready companies. Hi, Michael. Now you are back. I'm just answering. I'm just answering the question of
cool. Yeah. Don't worry.
And regarding the, of course, some companies want to collaborate with universities as well and understand what's going on there. But if you think about innovations that you can utilize not easily, but quite quickly, then of course it's good that they are some kind of commercial aspect. For example, university spin-off, they have developed it there and researched it, developed the technology, and then when they feel that now that could be valuable for someone, then they usually have a spin-off company who start to focus on that.
Yeah, I can also answer quickly to Harry if you want.
Yeah.
Very important. It's a very important question, because the question is, what are you looking for? And this is not only applying to startup versus or company startups versus university. It also applies to each stage a startup is located in, right? So there's let's say there's a chain of maturity, I would say, right? You have the least maturity in terms of a product, not in terms of research, right? But which you have usually in universities, right? Because you have core technology, you have concepts, you have even not only concepts, you have real technology, but it's not commercialized. So it's the ease of doing business is relatively tough, because there's maybe not even a commercial structure to doing this. And then you have startups, and sometimes the startups have left the technology, obviously, than the university, but at least there is a technical, it's a legal framework around it. And then you have different stages of maturity in the startups, up till the big multinational companies, which have not only technology, they also have maybe frame contracts with you already, and they have an easy order form for their solution and whatever, right? So there's different levels of ease of business. And the question is, where in your organization are you located in, and what's really your intention, right? So if you are in a research and development team which wants to assess, I don't know, the market on a specific area, or wants to really co-design a product with someone, then I think universities and research institutes are the right thing to work with, because you want to have cutting technology. You don't need a product, because you don't have a product either. So you need to just have all the bright minds and technologies to stick together, build something together, and then evolve this into a product. But the more you go into the regular functions in a company, and that also doesn't matter if you're in a corporate or in a startup or wherever you're working in, if you need a product, because let's say you have a product, you want to enhance it with something, then the more product you get, the better it is, right? So then for a startup or a corporate, it's tough to work with a university, because you need to productize then. If there is no spin-off, what Paavo said before, which productized this already, what technology transfer office or something like this, then it's tougher basically to integrate this and to pay for it and to productize it basically, right? So really depends who you're working with, and that's also an important piece of advice, at least from my side, is both sides needs to understand what's the goal, right? If someone wants a solution to be just plug in and just pay for it and let's go, then the maturity needs to be there on both ends. Otherwise, both ends would be not happy, right? Because I mean, even if you sell it to them and they don't realize it, it's bad. And also for the other side, if you don't have a product but it's expected and then you can't deliver, also bad. So I think this fit in goals and how much product maturity is needed is key. Yeah. And we as a company, but also I think generally companies, they work with all stages. I mean, very small companies probably not, but large companies usually work with all stages. The question only is who, right? And typically, let's say if you go to a marketing and sales function, you need to have a product. If you go to a research and development function, no matter which company you're in, no matter if that's biotechnology or automotive or under industrial or e-commerce, right? The more research you are, the more you have to go also to the research and development functions.
Yeah. Thanks for these good clarifications and thoughts, and I have a lot of hard questions for you, as I said earlier. So, but is there something, if you think about those pillars, these ecosystem, data-driven approach and execution. Do you have any something that you would like to pick up from there and talk more?
Yes. So I mean, that's when I got shut out of the system somehow, right? So I was sticking with the ecosystem because I think that's interesting. So if you, for example, have a particular area you want to work with, let's say the Nordics, or you're sitting in Central Europe, you want to work in Europe on the Nordics, then it makes sense to engage in an ecosystem, because then you need to find partners which are in an ecosystem, which are multipliers, and then you much better get to know what's going on and what's good and what's bad. Because I mean, right? So it's not only the sales pitch, right? So that's maybe to conclude this one. And then you also get warm intros, because it's much of a difference if you have a company who knows a company who tells, hey, this is a good guy, and now work together. So this makes all the difference, because in the end, it's not about the scouting in the end, right? It's about the collaboration afterwards. Collaboration is a social job. Technology is involved and of course key, but in the end, if it's a social interaction between humans, and if that doesn't work, then the rest also doesn't work. So I think all this actually connections to the right people make a lot of sense. So maybe that's to pillar one.
Yeah.
Let's move quickly to the next one. I think also Paavo has a lot of thoughts on this, because I think that's kind of and it's not the opposite, but it's a very complementary pillar. Is how can you be structured and data driven in this? Because I think you also have in this ecosystem connection to be structured and data driven, but also generally structured and data driven, because there's a lot of things in that business, right? So there's so many companies, and the question is what makes sense for you, right? What are good companies? What are bad companies? And you need to identify clearly what are your goals. So you need to structurally understand what is, let's call it, requirement demand you have. This can be if you have a customer internally in your company, or if you personally need something. Try to be as structured as possible in this, because only then you can kind of really understand what you're also looking for, and you can also balance, because you won't find the silver bullet most likely, right? So you find a company which is a good fit, or you find a technology which is a good fit, but it's not exactly what you need in many cases. So you need to really understand what is it, what you need, what is important, what's less important, have a clear picture on this, and then be able to kind of map what you find out there. And also to be able to do this, you need to structurally look at things, right? So you need to structurally assess companies, and then things like what you guys at Catapult are doing makes sense, because digesting the data from a company and trying to bring that into useful metrics and useful concrete measures and concrete things which you can compare is a lot of value, right? Because in the end, you have to, there's gut feeling, there's a lot of social piece in it, but it's also structure, because there's so many, right? Yeah. So you need to understand kind of the data points of the technology, of the company you want to work with, and then kind of match this. And then you also need to organize yourself on how you do this, right? So this can be, if you're scouting, let's say, just on, let's take maybe an event as an example, right? So you can go to an event, you just talk to people, and that's it, right? So you might make some good connections, but you can also go there, and this applies also to the virtual world of you, and then understand what's there, and then have a look what's there, understand all the companies which are there, assess all the companies, figure out what makes sense, and then meet only with the ones which are of a good fit, and plan it in advance, structure the feedback, and then you basically know, okay, what's in it for me there. And then if you scale this up, you need probably also a data-driven tool or a data-driven approach to, if you want to scale this approach to a whole country, Europe, the world. How do you get all this information on the companies? You assess kind of the baseline and kind of shortlist what is actually interesting for you.
Hey, I have one question for you regarding the data. That have you faced that type of situation that we have faced quite many times, too many times, that there is a corporation who think that now they have this type of need, and they Google and maybe meet some opportunities there in events and so on. Then they have a list of 15 companies, and they feel that, okay, which one of these could be the best one for us? And then in some cases they call us and say that, could you double check that, is there some other options as well? Because we feel that most of those best cases are on our list already, but could you double check? And then when we analyzed those more than 2 million companies, suddenly they are, let's say, 800 companies that could be matched. Of course, those are not the best. All of those are not good options, but they are options. And then when we start to analyze it step by step, and we have the 15 cases, finally, those are the best 15. Those can be totally different than what they check it out, because they had 15 options, not 800 where they started. So basically they forget those more than 98% of the cases that they haven't checked it out at all. And they make that selected best option out of those less than 2%. So have you seen that type of situation that people basically they have group of companies, but they don't have that data type of approach that they would do that systematically?
Well, the question is, I mean, I think that's it's key is where does the baseline come from? And I think this kind of boils down to what I said initially, right? So if those 15 companies come from desktop research, I just Google it, and then, oh yeah, those are like the ones who paid most in Google, and that's what I get. Then it's probably not the right choice, right? I think it's very tough for a company if you don't have a structured approach to understand actually what are relevant companies for your space, right? So if you yourself try to identify it and have someone just looking for it, you won't find the right ones. I'm 100% sure that this happens all the time. If you are just have some person who has no experience in this, that's also important. Just scouting the internet to figure out what are the best companies, and then they come up with a list and they send it to you. For sure, this will be the result, because how would this person identify all the relevant companies, right? So I think if that's the approach, for sure, this is going to happen.
So that is some kind of tricky part of that there is a lot of options, and that's great, but same time it brings a quite big challenge as well. So, and
also the assessing what is, I mean, if you have 800, it's also bad, right? Because you need to drill it down, you need to make use of it, because there's a lot of noise in this, right? Exactly. And that's why I believe that there's kind of there's a lot of value in trying to understand what's all there, but also then having means to really understand what's good, and having connections to players which are professional in this. So, for example, I do like to work with investors, VCs, ecosystems a lot, because I have someone I can talk to about a specific field which has already a lot of knowledge on this, and which day job is actually operating in that space. And I mean, I can't be professional in all spaces, or at least to the level of professionalism I want to be. And so I need to discuss it with people who are, right? And then with this, and that's also why I think ecosystem is so important, combined with structure and data, is you basically, well, you get the data which is out there, check one, but then you also get the more nuanced feedback of who is performing well, what is good companies, what has good traction, who have experts seen to be up and coming. And if you combine this, then you actually make the most out of it, because it's structured. You have also the social interactions, you have things which are not available in the data, and then basically together, this is actually what you'll see most valuable.
And then regarding, if we think about this outsourced and in-house innovation scouting, there are of course pros and cons, and there isn't that this is bad, this is good type of thing, because it depends a lot what you are looking for, what type of capabilities you have already in place in your organization. But tell your thoughts that those pros and cons of outsourcing or doing it in-house.
Yeah. Well, I think the first key to understand what's pro and what's con for you, and I'll go through it in a second, but I think it's very important that you understand what are your goals. This is kind of, I think, paramount on this, because depending on the goals and where you are, it can be a lot of those cons and pros can be very different, right? Yeah. So I think upfront, it's really important to understand, for example, one thing, how fast do you want to get results, right? If you want to get results fast, you don't have a team internally, you need to do it externally, right? Because you can't just ramp this up in a second, right? So clearly here, for example, external support makes it much faster. But on the other hand, if you want to internalize it, if that's a goal of you, right? So do I want to build up this internal skill set, or do I even have this internal skill set? Do I have people for this? Then it might make more sense to actually look into having also, I'm never saying exclusive here, because personally, and we go for pros and cons, but personally, I think a hybrid approach is the only way to go. But if you say you want to build up internal skills, right, and you have, let's say you have a person, you think he has time for this, or she has time for this, she has the skills for this, which is also interesting, then building up these skills further might be a very good asset, because it's good to have those skills, because I mean, technology is embedded in all business we're doing today, right? So having skills and understanding technology companies out there is a skill which that person will use in any job he or she will have in the future, right? So it's good to have this internally. And especially if you have someone who has already the right skill set from previous jobs or from just the nature of university, then this is a good thing to build up, right? But of course, this is not as fast as ramping up external resources, because let's say if you work with a team which already exists, then it's much easier to just onboard them. Another layer here is spillovers you might have, right? So if you do it internally, you have spillovers to basically this person will do maybe something else afterwards, and so you have that skill in the organization, which is great. But also, if you work externally, you have spillovers because you get external know-how into the organization. If you work with them, that spills also over to your internal capacity. So that's kind of has both pros and cons. So it's not very easy. And then also, where is your use for this, right? So that's something I also, I mean, spillovers are great, but let's say if you have one person who's doing innovation scouting and afterwards he's going into enterprise sales, then it's okay to have that spillover, but it's not the best thing to have. If you have a CVC and you have internal innovation capacities, then maybe it makes a lot of sense to build those things up, because you have different vehicles in the organization. If you rotate around them, then the skills kind of will benefit each of the piece, right? So
yeah, what we have learned during these years, that it's some kind of also the organization, when they start to do, and when they start from the scratch, they basically start to learn step by step, and really often first they utilize outsourced capabilities, as you mentioned, that so that you can get some results fast and learn also same time. But then I think it's good to start to build your own capabilities step by step same time, so that you don't need to wait those years first, but you can take those steps, but same time you can start to build it. And we have seen that has been really, really helpful. And many of our clients that we worked earlier on research side, so that our data analyst and research team work for them, and we help them how they should do things as well. And then nowadays, many of those, they have own team who do it, and then maybe we help them at some point, but basically they have the basic capabilities there, and they can run it and do it systematically, and same time learn all the time more and more. And then maybe they utilize our platform only and handle everything by themselves. So that's the kind of learning curve.
And I mean, also you can test more things if you work externally, right? So maybe you don't want to hear this, but theoretically, I can work with you, Paavo, and then I decide, oh, I don't like what this guy is doing to me. This is not efficient, and I'm just okay. Contract ended. I work with someone else, right? And but of course, it's good for both sides in the end. If it doesn't work, I mean, it doesn't make sense for anyone, right? But I think that's a key thing. If you start building up something internally and you don't really know what you want, you start something and it's there, like pivot internally, because let's say there's different approaches, right? There's one approach where you say, I want to investigate deep into specific ecosystem, let's say the Nordics. I want to investigate an internal team, building up ties to all of it, and then figure out kind of connections, set up an accelerator program in the Nordics. So if you do this, you have a buy-in because you have partners. You have partners in the city of, I don't know, Helsinki and Stockholm, and you have accelerators you work with. You have invested money into it. You have people who want to do this because it's their baby. But then you realize, oh, actually, no one in Nordics is doing what I need. Maybe, right? So I need someone from, I don't know, India. And so all what you did is actually in vain, and you can't pivot it that quickly because you have invested in that relationship. You have invested in the structure. And so migrating now to researching or technology scouting in India will be super tough for you. And it's basically starting new and not even possible because you can't just start new, right? And if you work with externals on that side, you can. So I think that this is also a balance you have. So it's what is yours? So you need to really understand what you want to do, and probably in the beginning, try to be flexible inside. Don't invest too much into building up an infrastructure which can't be changed. Work with partners, and then once you know what you want, then of course you can also ramp up more internal in a specific direction.
Yeah. You mentioned this data approach, but also the structure, systematic way of doing so. How do you build the structure that basically so that things that you are doing are some kind of systematic way of doing?
Yeah, I mean the how is. It's always a question. I think there's different ways of doing it. It can be writing it down on paper, on Excel, but it also can be utilizing a tool, right, such as what you are building. But I think the key in the end is you need to have a certain structure on how you do things, because I mean there's a lot of things you need to make sense of what's there, and you also need to have your gates kind of to understand kind of how do you select things. One for actually being able to select the right things, but then also to tracking success, because in the end, if you're just randomly doing things and you're not kind of monitoring the company you're working with, the technology you're working with, how it's perceived in the organization, who is actually working with it in the organization, what are results then in the organization, what are KPIs then afterwards, right? So this whole chain from engagement to value creation, you need to have a framework for this. And I don't want to judge what's the best thing, but I think you need to have something to monitor where you are and where you want to go to, because in the end, in the innovation game, you will at some point, well, first of all, it's a lot of stuff and you need to make sense for yourself, but you will also be asked on what's your progress. And only if you have a structure, then you can also report your progress back to your stakeholders.
Yeah, and that's a good point that basically if you can't convince people there internally, you screw up at some point because they don't believe that there is a professional way of doing, and then there is in trust, and that's the also good to keep in mind. Then if we think about that, if they are okay, I have a question in my mind that how to get started, but you have also described already that you need to know your goals and what you really want to achieve and what is the schedule of it, so that you can think about that. Okay, what option would be good for me or our organization?
Yeah, but let's 1 second on this, so because that's really important for me. I think really on anything, but on innovation more than on anything else, goal setting is key. So what are exactly what you want to achieve, and not only you usually have I'm not sure who's in the call, right? But usually you have a stakeholder, can be the CEO of your company, can be a business division lead or whatever it is. But there's a goal, and you have to make sure this goal is clear, and it's clear for the stakeholder, and it's clear for you, and that defines on how you do the things afterwards. So I think if there's one thing to do, then that's this one. Because if you don't, and there can be very different goals, right? So it can be, I don't know, let's say in an innovation game, it can be, I actually want to deliver value for my product. So that's the goal you would assume generally. But you have to make sure that that's the goal, because someone else could also have a goal. Yeah, I want to change the culture in my organization. It's also a very valid goal, right? And you need to have to understand the balance between product execution goals versus cultural goals. And you can also have a image goal, right? I want that my company is perceived more. And I think all of those, let's just stick with those three, they are very valid to have because it makes sense for a lot of reasons, but you need to understand what's the balance, right? And if you have a lot of execution goals and less culture and image goals, then you also need to make sure that execution is key in what you do. And if you have other ones, then you need to find a more integrative approach in the organization, focus more on PR and communication of your innovation scouting initiatives, integrate more people into it. So it's important to understand. And I think it's all related, and it all eventually in the end you need to build product. But the question is on how important is each dimension.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that that personally you believe in that both approaches, that you have these outsourced capabilities but also in-house doing, and so tell more about it. So from, if you think about what in your context, for example, what is some kind of best combination of it?
Again, it depends on what you have, right? But let's say I want to build up an internal innovation team, right? Which works with external technologies, right? Because it could also work internally with technologies. But let's assume external technologies from somewhere integrating some sort of startup engagement team. Then key is to have a strong internal setup, because most of the work, this is not a scouting piece, but most of the work in the startup engagement is actually in bringing external stuff into the organization and executing it internally. That's the key, because only with execution value is created, obviously, right? So the scouting is only one piece, but therefore you need a team. But this team has to be embedded in the organization, obviously. But in order to make them successful in what they do, they need to be also professional in the innovation scouting game. They need to understand it, right? So what you will have is you need the internal team, but it needs to be also upskilled and integrated in the external ecosystems. And naturally, as a company, people are better in the internal, usually, because they are in your company. So they're better in your company than they are outside, usually, right? So there is a learning field. And then what I would say is you need to pair up with partners. Can be one, can be two, can be many, depending really on the size and what you want and which dimensions you're looking into, which you work closely together. And it can be also different things, right? So it can be in an ecosystem, like an accelerator partner. It can be a scouting partner. It can be a lot of things. It can be a platform partner. But it's kind of mapping the skills you have, so to complete it and to make sure that also there is spillovers from the external side to your internal team. And you have all the assets you need in the end to basically deliver what you want to achieve. And you won't like this external component, you won't have initially in the company. So you will always have to work with someone outside, right? So and the question is only who, right? And that really is defined by the goals you're having. And then you're basically trying to forge a team together, both internally and externally, to deliver in the end this. And then you'll have positive spillovers in both sides. And I would generally advise for against only external, because that makes it's too decoupled from actually your internal organization. It can't be decoupled, because decoupled means you don't get in the execution. And I would also advise against only internal, because you just don't know what's best outside, and you are limited by your internal know-how, and you always have an internal know-how if you're in a company. No matter if you had startup experience before, as soon as you're in a company, you are getting more experience in the company than outside of the company. So it always makes sense to find someone who is out there, who is working in that space you're looking into.
Yeah, that's really good points. And then if you have any questions, please write down those. And there's Harry wrote. Wait a second. Mention also.
So I think that's two questions. We have the first answered, and the second piece is the highly geographically contextual. Yeah. Why do I talk about this? Well, I mean, I think it's so. Of course, nowadays it's maybe even a bit better than we had in the past, because we are now actually more virtual than we used to be a couple of years ago. So that makes it easier. But so there's two things. One thing is geographic makes sense because it's easier to work with people closer to you, both culturally and geographically. It's a fact. I think the cultural piece can be actually enriching if you do it right. So this is not necessarily a no, so that might be even good, but it requires work. But the geographic proximity helps because as there's lots of trust involved in this, it makes sense to meet. That's fact. And if I now sitting in Europe and I need to travel to Australia every time to meet my partner, and not only have the time zone differences in my regular meetings, I also have if I'm in a big company, maybe the policy says it has to be business class, then you have a, I don't know, 6,000 euro flight back and forth, which is actually for a proof of concept, if you are going with 2 or 3 people, eating up a lot of your budget already. So that's just one example. You don't have to fly a business, but
yeah. And we mentioned this time difference, and that if you think about the working together, and especially in the case that are not ready yet, you need to develop it together and think about and matching those different things. Then the daily life is much harder.
Yeah.
If this other side of the planet, even Europe, Silicon Valley type of situation, that can be quite challenging.
I'm not saying it's not possible. So currently, I'm also working with colleagues in the US from the West Coast. So there is a difference. But you have to, I mean, you can deal with this easily, right? But it's something you have to deal with. And the more stuff you have to deal with, especially with partners you don't know well, the more complexity it adds to it. So that's one piece. And then the other piece is, that's going back to my first pillar, is it's usually you need to have an understanding of an ecosystem to really understand if it's well. So if you don't work in an ecosystem, so if I now, so for example, I do not have a startup know-how in Japan. I actually worked in Japan, but it's been a while ago, but I didn't work in the startup space, so I don't know what's going on there. And that's why you need to have to understand an ecosystem to be really able to understand what's good, what's bad, who to ask if that company is good for you, who to, if let's say if you are embedded in an ecosystem, then you have, let's say you have a couple of VCs, you have a couple of ecosystem players, you have a couple of companies, you work with a company, you talk to the investors, hey, is this company performing well? Have you checked them before in the last round they were raising, and why did you choose against it? Do they have runway? Is that what they're talking? Is that correct? Is that technology sound? Have you heard about this? And that's something you can do only if you know people in an ecosystem, right? And if you don't, then you don't, and you don't have that edge, right? You just, it's just a data point, and you try to get what's there, but of course you don't get all the data. So that's why I think on top of having structured approaches of finding companies from all over, you have to make sure that wherever you locate your efforts into, it makes sense that you understand what's going on, where the players, and know people who can talk about the companies you actually want to work with.
Yeah, really, really good points. And we have 3 things at least what I would like to go through. So first we could have a next poll. So second poll. So wait a second. Now we would like to ask that which topic would you want to learn more about in possible next webinar? So there are 3 options. So the biggest successes. Now please go to that slido.com again, and there is that when you put that code is 418678. There's 3 options. So biggest successes and screw ups in corporate venturing. And then the easiest way to use data in innovation and unspoken rules in a successful corporate venturing. So let's check it out, what you would like to learn more about. Okay, let's check it out. Quite same. So hopefully we have more here. Okay, now it's going. Yeah, so yeah, so easiest way to use data and unspoken rules. Yeah. Please, if there's, please use that Slido, and because that is quite interesting to hear your thoughts and what would bring the most of value for you. And then also there's a now you should see the feedback there in the live webinar tool. There should be the feedback session or part of the feedback as well, where you can now it's there. So please give the feedback as well there. And one thing that I would like to ask you also, Michael, I have one main question for you still, but then I would like to say that if you have any questions or thoughts that you would like to discuss further, please you can put the virtual coffee with me. I'm more than happy to help and think about, and it's totally free, and you can utilize it as you want, and I'm more than happy to go through really openly and share all learnings and discuss further those. So there's a QR code, or you can utilize calendly.com/Paavo-Beckman, so you can book directly there, call to my calendar. But then now, if you think about Michael, if we summarize this, now we have talked about that understanding the field regarding the ecosystem and the data approach, and then it's important to think about your internal capabilities so that you can then do and execute also something, and you underline that there is you think about that it's good approach that you are utilizing those outsourced capabilities as well, but start to build at least step by step that own team somehow, that learning is bigger and bigger, and you can execute things there. But what type of, if you would like to summarize and pick up some kind of 1-2 things that people should remember from that session. So if you think about the success of the innovation scouting, what are those few things that you really would like to underline?
So let me try. So first of all, I think understand where you are. What is your status quo? What are your skills? What are your missing pieces? This is key. Secondly, once you do that, what are your goals? Well, this is basically a step you do at the same time. So what is actually what you want to achieve with this innovation scouting? From startup zoo to value creation, something in the between. Mm-hmm. So really understand kind of what's there. Do this both. Once you have this, if you understand what your goals, then make a plan on how you want to achieve this. So I think also here the structure starts. Be also clear on how you, because starting with this, you can actually assess of how much you should build up internally and how much you should build up externally. What are the missing pieces you don't have internally? You have to fill out externally, and then try to find a partner which is matching these demands. So just not start alone and try to make something. Start to really understand very structuredly what you have versus what is missing. Find someone who complements the missing fields so that you say, in the end, I have the skills to reach my goals. And once you have this, start doing it, obviously. Be structured in doing it. So that's also key. I would, in the beginning, even that's something which is against innovation, structure is key. So take this professionally and try to structure your approaches. Do this together, and then you basically will be successful in the end, hopefully.
yeah and it's also based on learnings. It's good to understand this is not some kind of one-off thing that okay, now we did it and now we get a lot of value and so on. That's a long-term thing, and you need to decide that do you want to do it, and if you want to do and utilize innovations out there, then it's a systematic doing and long-term work, not some kind of that it's easy and fast, and so that's good to understand, definitely.
I mean, you can for sure easily ask someone like you guys or someone else, hey, I need companies in that space, deliver something. That's fast.
Yeah, you can get it, but then if
what's the value?
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about the whole your organization and the taking those steps, it's a systematic doing, basically. So definitely so. But hey, thanks a lot, Michael, and thanks a lot for all attendees. I mentioned some countries, but I saw also that there were people from Australia, Poland, many other during the session, and so thanks a lot for all of you, and you will get the recording of the session, and also you get summary slides of that session. So thanks a lot for this session, and Michael, have a great springtime there in German. So let's keep in touch. So
absolutely,
have a great weekend when we will be there. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Take care, guys. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yep. Bye-bye.